Music from this episode is available on the Twin Peaks Evangelion Spotify playlist. Check the show notes for a link.
A candy-colored clown they call a Sandman. He goes to my room every night. Just gets me to start and to whisper, go to sleep, everything is alright. I close my eyes, then I drift away into the magic night. I softly say a silent prayer, like dreamers do. Then I fall asleep to dream my dreams of you. In dreams I walk with you. In dreams I talk to you.
To Twin Peaks Evangelion. This is a podcast where we talk about Twin Peaks and we talk about Evangelion, and we're coming to you with a really special episode today where we're probably not going to be talking about either of those two things, despite the title of the podcast. I'm joined by my buddy Vincent. Kia ora, Vincent. How you doing?
Hola, Craig. I'm doing fine in this hellscape of a hell that we call summer.
Okay. Pretty hot over there, is it?
I'm still sunburned from Disneyland that I went to a week ago.
God, I really feel for you. Says the man who just came back from Hawaii 5 days ago.
Yeah.
Today we're joined by a really special guest. We're stoked to welcome onto the podcast Colin from the brilliant Cream Corn in the Universe podcaster, Twin Peaks podcast that looks at characters. And if you subscribe to our feed, you might have heard my conversation with Colin about Andy Brennan on his show as the last thing that we posted. How's things with you, Colin? How you doing?
They're going pretty good. Just released my Laura Palmer Last 7 Days episode.
Awesome.
I'm not sure when this will come out, but I do also have Major Briggs and Nadine Hurley firmly lined up as well. Like, those are all completely ready to go. I just like to stick with the Monday at midnight my time format, just so I can have some for people to look forward to week after week.
Awesome. Very cool. I'm not like a lot of podcasters. I tend to get really impatient and don't have much patience for sort of recording stuff in advance and then scheduling it for release later on. So I tend to edit stuff as soon as it's recorded or close to it, and then just get it out there as soon as I can. I hate the idea of sitting on something. I don't know. So I admire your tenacity in recording stuff ahead of time and releasing it periodically. That's admirable.
Oh, thank you.
We're here to talk about two films. Vinny, what are we here to talk about?
We're here to talk about a David Lynch film, of course, which would be Blue Velvet.
Mm-hmm.
But also, we got to mix in some anime, because, that's half the show. So we also got Perfect Blue. I don't know how we stitch these two together. I can't see any way they're related.
No, it's not like there's a completely perfect mashup title that we can call this episode or anything.
I know. We're the guys who just put the two names of the shows in our title and didn't think anything else.
Yeah, that's right. So yes, we are going to be covering David Lynch's Blue Velvet and also Satoshi Kon's masterpiece, Perfect Blue. Before we get into it, Colin, I know you're a big Twin Peaks fan. How much anime have you seen in your life?
Certainly not to the extent that you both have, but, of course I love stuff like...
Not the extent that Vinny has, thank you.
I know Craig's excuse me.
Excuse me,
apologies.
sir.
No, it's I find that I only watch a few every now and then, but it's I have one friend where he just seems to watch like everything under the sun. But I'll look through his collection, like, oh hey, I can talk about The Wind Rises, or I can talk about The Garden of Words. So a lot of stuff like Satoshi Kon, Hayao Miyazaki, and then a few miscellaneous ones that seem to grab my attention. That's usually the way that I go these days.
Sure. You've never taken the plunge and delved into Neon Genesis Evangelion?
No, it's one of those things where I always wanted to, but it's sort of, actually I did the same thing with Twin Peaks, where for years I'm like, oh, I'll get around to it. And it's people whose opinions I trust say that they like it and they think I would like it. It's just one of those like shows that I just happen to not watch. Like, for example, like with Better Call Saul, I remember like, oh, I want to watch that when it initially came out, and now it's over and I still have yet to actually watch it.
Oh. My
yeah,
God,
I really drag my feet. It's quite remarkable how much I drag my feet, because I guess I think I was mentioned on my last episode. I was someone described in 1990 Twin Peaks as a TV show for people that don't watch TV, and I think I was like, oh, okay, I guess maybe I fit the market for that for all the wrong reasons, because if I binge watch a show, that's like an event. It's like I don't move on from one show or another. Just there's one that really strikes me, and then I just kind of pick and choose a little bit carefully.
Nice. Yeah, no, the best quote about one of the best quotes about Twin Peaks that I've seen is that you know, Neon Genesis Evangelion is is about fighting robots as much as Twin Peaks is a detective show. So that gives you some insight into sort of the depths of where that show goes, and it's worth your time, Colin. Like, I think, you know, if you've got a break in your podcasting schedule or whatever, just chuck on the first few episodes of NGE and try that. I think it'd be worth your time.
Yeah, right now I'm starting to think of I'm gonna try to do my episodes weekly till the end of the year, and I'm still debating if I want to make it bi-weekly for a while or just take like a 2-month break. But I do. Neon Genesis Evangelion is one of those shows that I have like high up on my list in terms of stuff to do during that time.
Nice, cool. Well, happy to bring you back on, and you know, if you ever want to document your thoughts on a podcast, happy to have you back.
If you want to feel sane after watching it and feel like, oh, I have people who have also gone through the journey.
Yeah, there's that too. All right, let's jump ahead. Where should we start? Which film do we want to start with?
Let's go the older one.
Go with the yearly order.
Yeah.
Start with Blue Velvet, because there's a little, as far I understand, for Satoshi Kon, his influences were Hayao Miyazaki, Terry Gilliam, and David Lynch. So I think it's just kind of interesting to see where it starts off with Blue Velvet and what may or may not have crossed over with Perfect Blue.
Sure. All right, let's dive in right there then. I know, Vinny, you watched this for the first time yesterday.
Yep.
Day before. What's your history with Blue Velvet, Colin?
Well, actually, for the longest time, the only David Lynch movie I watched was Eraserhead, which was way back in 2009.
Wow. Okay.
And I managed to go like 10 years without watching anything Lynch related. He's just one of those guys where I always loved him in interviews, and I just somehow never got around to watching his films. And then throughout 2019 and 2020, I started watching like more of his filmography, plus like the art life, his art documentary, and of course Twin Peaks as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so you know, when I look at Lynch's filmography in Twin Peaks, I see a lot of like those like similar connections in that relatively short span. But yeah, so Blue Velvet, I believe, was the third Lynch movie I watched, which was right behind Eraserhead, Fire Walk with Me, and then Blue Velvet.
Right. Cool. I'm going to bring back a segment that we've done before, Vinny. I'm going to bring back the 30-second recap. And given that this is your first time watching it, Vinny, I'd like you to recap and as rapid fire as possible. What is the plot of Blue Velvet? Ready? Set. Okay, go.
Blue Velvet is a murder mystery that takes place in the small Americana town of Lumberton, USA. It is around Jeffrey Beaumont as he comes back home to see his ailing father who has fallen ill and needs to help out with the family hardware store, but he stumbles upon a murder mystery and that consumes his life, that consumes his love life, and ultimately is almost his downfall, but somehow he finds a way to get love at the end. And it's very sick and psycho and very Lynch, and I like it.
Nice.
That's pretty good. Yeah, given that you
right.
just watched that yesterday, I would have thought you've had that rehearsed for a while.
No! Craig always does this to me. I always forget the segment until it happens, like, get your thoughts quickly together.
Yeah, no, he was up all night practicing that. I know. Yeah. So what did you think overall, Vinny? David Lynch style. Expand on that. Elaborate on that. What did you think of the film overall?
So, knowing that like this is the earliest I've seen of his filmography after Mulholland Drive, Fire Walk with Me, and Lost Highway, and it's like I can see like the rhythm of like, okay, set up like the world and then the mystery and then like a sharp turn into other stuff. So I can recognize those beats of it, but also it was nice to see something that wasn't straight up like, okay, here's the complete overhaul of the shift like a Lost Highway or Mulholland Drive where it's like, oh,
sure,
now it's time to re-catch up with everything in the status quo. So I really like that aspect of it where it's more traditional, like, okay, I start with this character and I'm ending with this character. Sure, he's gone through a journey, attorney, but it's the same exact person. So that's what I liked.
Right.
I also like seeing the Kyle and Laura Dern just chemistry at the beginning, because they have the best chemistry in the return. So it's like just seeing like this is the first time them working together and just having that natural just set where it's like it just made me wish, like, dang it, I wish there was a third season Twin Peaks with them young and just working together. Like, I wanted that.
Yeah, that would have been
I guess
great.
on that topic, did you view, I mean, because I'm assuming you watched Part 18 before you watched Blue Velvet.
Right.
Do you view Blue Velvet as almost like a spiritual prequel? Like this very loosely could be the early days of Dale Cooper and Diane type of dynamic?
Absolutely, but also like in that like deleted scene from like the missing pieces of like how uppy he is about just talking to her, even though Laura Dern's not in that room, just like the uppiness of like his intrigue, like there's a mystery and I'm into it. There's a mystery in this room. You've changed something and I know something's changed in this room. So I feel like, yeah, it absolutely is that like prequel to that dynamic.
Yeah,
Very good.
I was going to bring that up. I mean, it is natural. Twin Peaks came after this, and a lot of people have drawn the comparisons between Blue Velvet and Twin Peaks in terms of almost like Blue Velvet was like a trial run or, a precursor to Twin Peaks. Do you feel that the characters of Jeffrey Beaumont and Dale Cooper, I mean, obviously they're played by the same person, do you feel that there is much overlap between those two characters?
I mean, just the hunger for mystery is the main thing, where it's like Dale's the guy who's like, the town just got weirder, but his devotion to the mystery never like wavered. It was like, no matter what challenge came for Dale Cooper, he was still all about Laura at the end. Heck, even when he had a chance to leave the mystery in the return, he still had to go back for Laura. It's just this devotion to the mystery, and that's what he gets out of life, just trying to solve the ultimate mystery.
What about you, Colin? What do you think about Jeffrey Beaumont as a proto-Cooper?
So actually, I guess before I get to Jeffrey Beaumont, it's probably good to talk about Lumberton compared to Twin Peaks because, well, one, it's called Lumberton, and of course, with Twin Peaks, it's like logging's like a big thing for them. But the other one is that you see, it's Arlene's the diner, and it only shows the establishment shot twice, but you see a logging truck behind it each time.
Yeah,
and I was
right.
like, oh, this is, and maybe it's just one of those things that just kind of retroactively fits in, but it's just one of those things that where I kind of see those spiritual prequel connections even more with Blue Velvet every time I watch it.
Yeah,
but no, I
absolutely.
would echo what Vinny said, is that there's that certain enthusiasm he has to solve it. Jeffrey Bowen's probably more of a Part 18 Richard, like a young Richard, than he would be a Dale Cooper, where, he's not chipper about it, but there's just this very serious nature that he has. So that's so I do see the connection, but I, again, come back to Part 18 is that's the episode where we see the most of Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern. Right. And that's so my primary connections are through that more so than what we see in those 3 seasons leading up to that.
I really like what you were saying there about Lumberton as kind of like a a template for Twin Peaks, and I think you're absolutely right. I think even the fact that it's called Lumberton, it's named after its primary industry, I guess. A lot of people have, have sort of analysed the opening to Blue Velvet, and
right.
I feel like it's absolutely just completely surface level film school 101.
Yeah.
That you've got these Norman Rockwell sort of scenes, and then I love the shot of the father hosing down the flower bed or whatever, and then like the hose is kind of tightened around the tap, and then something happens to his heart and he collapses, and then dives through the grass, and that's the seedy underbelly. It's such it's like it's entry level film analysis basically.
Yeah.
To be fair, though, I will say that I do generally agree with that sentiment, but there's little things I pick up on each time that I feel like that it adds, there's a little more to the dynamic. Like, for example, the night when Frank Booth meets Jeffrey, and then he gets gut punched and attacked, where he wakes up, and it's like he's sitting in the mud, and then you hear the sprinklers going off in a spot that's middle of nowhere. And I kind of thought that might be a parallel to his father's journey, because that's a period where his father's in critical condition. Jeffrey is effectively in critical condition as well. And it's sort of that ambiguity of how, can they both get out of this?
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm just thinking about this now as well, is that, with the father, it often strikes me as funny, but there's the scene where he's, collapsed, and the dog is kind of like jumping on him, trying to drink the water, but he's really sort of manic about it. It's almost a parallel to how Frank was kind of all up in Jeffrey's face when he was attacking him and stuff, and just, has that sort of primal look about him.
There's actually that scene with the first dream sequence where it shows his father in the hospital, his face is all stretched out, and then it like has a hard cut to Frank Booth, where, because I think this movie is like, there's like a shift of definitely power dynamics, but in like a dysfunctional, almost like family-like type of thing, where we'll go to that like when we get to Dorothy Valens, but that's just something I've kind of picked up on each time, and even the Days of Wrapped in Plastic, John Thorne did a great compare and contrast of Jeffrey Beaumont with Dale Cooper, and that was a big part for that article.
No, I'll have to check that out. That sounds really interesting. Where should we go to next with this? Keen to get you guys' thoughts on this. I feel like, sorry, I'll back up a second. So Blue Velvet was the first Lynch film that I saw, not knowing anything about the man as a filmmaker or anything. I just picked it out of the video store one night and put it on. It was at a time in my life where I was getting into film and becoming like a film guy. And yeah, I was blown away by it. The first time I saw it, I did think it was kind of weird because it was unusual from what I'd seen before. But compared to other Lynch films, I feel like it's a lot more of a straightforward narrative. Would you guys agree with that?
100%.
I would, and I think it's also worth mentioning is that I view this as basically a blueprint of what his filmography would be like from that point on. Because, with Eraserhead, it was a student film that he, obviously that's a great story in of itself, but then he was a director for hire for Elephant Man and Dune. And to be fair, he did a tremendous job with Elephant Man, and Mel Brooks, he trusted him to the utmost ability that he'd make a great film. But then Dune came out, and the thing is that he spent years plugging away on a movie that he had no final cut.
Yeah,
and I think that's what prompted him, because it was after that movie he told Dino De Laurentiis, because Dino De Laurentiis funded both Dune and this movie and Blue Velvet.
Right.
He said, I want to do another movie, but only if I have creative control. And the thing with Blue Velvet is that he's had this in his head since at least the early days of Eraserhead. So you think of like what he was fine-tuning, how he views like the color blue, his use of color, electricity, the dynamics that he's really into. And a lot of that carries over, even if it's relatively linear in this movie, that you can see there's a core aspect of how he views his archetypes, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like Blue Velvet might be, if someone who had no knowledge of David Lynch sort of came to me and said, what, I've heard this name, David Lynch, what's a good film to sort of, that I could check out? Part of me wants to recommend this. Part of me wants to recommend Blue Velvet because, it is, I guess there's less abstraction. There's less kind of like, overtly surreal stuff. Like it's not like Lost Highway where, the entire narrative shifts halfway through. It's not like Mulholland Drive where, you're scratching your head through the final act of that film. It is more straightforward. But part of me doesn't want to recommend it because it might be one of the darkest David Lynch films in terms of how the characters are treated, especially the female characters are treated. What's your sense of that?
So not sure if this is worth mentioning is that the first movie I watched was Eraserhead, and that was a period where I was really into indie movies, but I was not really into that level of art house type of films. And I mentioned this in my Laura Palmer episode, that the first time I watched Eraserhead, I had a bunch of friends that were leering at me, just like, oh, what's Colin going to say? What's Colin going to say? And it's a really weird dynamic to watch that movie. But then the next movie I watched is Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, and that is, to me, I think of all the movies, not just in Lynch's filmography, but in all films, that embodies like a true evil, I feel like that's the movie for me. So when I got to Blue Velvet, I actually thought it was pretty mild by comparison. It's sort of like, something like Midnight Cowboy, where you watch that movie in like the late 60s. That was a very like intense and irreverent film.
Yeah.
But as time's gone on, we've seen other films that have tried to up the ante or have its own take on just this intense visceral violence.
Yeah.
So my mainstay is more so the character archetypes, and a lot of the violence is a bit secondary, for lack of a better term. It's more of how Dennis Hopper, it's more of like his reactions and how other people react to him that I have this more upset feeling by.
What about you, Vinny? What was your take on the more extreme aspects of Blue Velvet?
It was very intense, but also like just the framing of it, like just the POV of like a closet and just looking through, and I just added the intensity because I'm sitting there like, okay, so is somehow Frank gonna like look into the closet because clearly like he wasn't good at hiding the closet since Dorothy found him just by the littlest of noise. She was ready to just grab the knife and just get someone out of the closet, but just the escalation of like the weirdness into the violence, just seeing this man pull out a breathing apparatus out of his pocket to take a hit and then just assault a woman was like, oh Jesus. Like I wasn't ready for anything in this movie. Like this happens every time, Colin, where I think I know what's gonna happen in a David Lynch thing, and then the shit happens. I'm like, oh, why do I ever make this false sense of security? I think, oh, I've seen part 8. I know what this man can do on screen. No, you idiot. Why would you ever think that?
That's the thing, is that with Lynch, there's something about his movies, because I don't really watch them on too frequent of a basis, but there's something about no matter how many times you watch them, there's still that visceral terror that you feel one way or another.
Right.
Like, for example, with this movie, and I know you just said you watched it for your first time last night, but for me, I've watched it at least, close to 10 times at this point. And the thing is that I always feel this visceral intensity whenever Jeffrey's like in that closet, or there's like stakes that are like being raised, because there's just some that Lynch understands the language beyond cinema. He knows something just farther beyond that, and knows how to make you just feel this in a way where, regardless if it's esoteric or linear.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely agree. I think that's the thing, and I think that's why other filmmakers, they try and do similar things, and a film reviewer might say that it's Lynchian, but I think the fact that Lynchian has become a descriptor of a certain style which you can't really articulate in other words. I think that just sort of speaks to the level that Lynch is operating at.
But like also the mainstream like reverse of this, I think recently, is like WandaVision. I heard so much that it's Lynchian and it's Blue Velvet. And seeing Blue Velvet, no.
Yeah.
The only thing I could feasibly think of is that 50s type of style town, but that's kind of where the comparisons end, for me at least.
Yeah, I think so. Let's talk about the character of Frank Booth, because I think his first appearance, and when he appears, the film kind of takes a lot darker of a turn. It's sort of it's a quirky, compelling mystery up until Jeffrey's in the closet and he sees Frank Booth come in and do what he does. Oh, how do you guys feel about Frank as a character, and I guess Dennis Hopper's portrayal? What do you reckon, Vinny?
It's almost like a proto Mr. C. Just like, what is there anything to redeem this man for? Because every action I see of him, it just makes me loathe him more and more. There's not an instance where I'm like, okay, that was good. I like that. Just this pure evilness. Like, I could believe that there is a black Bob ball inside Frank.
Yeah, for sure. And he's the way he differs from Mr. C is that he just seems a lot more unpredictable and unhinged.
Right.
Mr. C kind of, he's intimidating and he embodies evil in a lot of ways, but for the most part has this really kind of controlled, quiet, sinister sense about him. Frank Booth just can explode into a rage at any opportunity. And I think the one character who have a sway over him is what is his name? Ben, the guy from Quantum Leap, who lip syncs into a torch, which I love.
Which, by the way, did you know that was actually completely unplanned? There was just one of those sound lights that was just sitting there, and you just thought, oh, this seems like it would be right. It's one of the many happy accidents that Lynch just thinks, oh, let's just go with it. Yeah,
no, I can totally imagine that happening. Yeah. What do you think about Frank Booth, Colin?
Well, I guess it's probably good to bring up Dennis Hopper first, because I don't know if you both know this, but Robert Loggia, who played Dick Laurent in Lost Highway, he actually was first lined up to play Frank Booth.
Oh, is that right?
And there's a thing where, of course, he would have been great in it. Right. And the reason why I ended up getting Dick Laurent later on is because there at a certain point he was waiting for casting for so long that he lost his lid on Lynch. Like, he stormed past the casting director and just verbally assaulted him. And Lynch just thought, that guy, like, when he did Lost Highways, like, that guy is perfect for Dick Laurent. But the
Awesome.
thing that makes Dennis Hopper perfect is that he was in a really bad spot where he had serious drinking problems. He was drinking like a 24 pack a day and like a
Sure.
bottle of like whiskey, and he was one of those people that thought he was just finding work, so he just wasn't like, a bum of sorts. But he
Right.
got like a very mean and very abrasive. And this is his second movie when he was starting to get clean. And what he said to Lynch is that he said no one else can play Frank Booth because I am Frank Booth, which is like the most terrifying thing you could sell someone on. But no one else could play that role. Like Robert Loggia would have been a good in that role, and he would have been memorable. But there's Dennis Hopper is like the one who steals the show for me. But I think for me, the if we're gonna go with the character Frank Booth specifically, even though he has this unstoppable, chaotic, evil aspect to him, the scene that unsells me the most is actually when Jeffrey sees him at the Slow Club, and he's actually crying to the song Blue Velvet because there's like this tiny bit of humanity in him, and it actually makes it even worse that he is what he is in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's kind of clutching that little scrap of blue velvet that he cut from Dorothy's robe at that point as well, isn't he?
And one of the things that I think a testament to how terrifying Frank Booth is, and I didn't really think of it until I watched it today, but there's that part where she's singing Blue Velvet, and then you see her attention diverts, and she has this like kind of terrified look on her face. Like even on stage, she just seems like very deeply unsettled by his presence. And again, it kind of reaffirms the idea that even when he's out in public and he's like has that vulnerability, that there's something still inherently terrifying about him.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to his unpredictable nature. He's in this relatively vulnerable state at this point, but we know from what we've seen that anything could sort of trip that and set him over the edge. Now, you guys are both psychoanalysts, I know, so let's speculate wildly. What do you reckon happened in Frank Booth's past to make him that way?
I think his mom either loved him too little or loved him too much.
He's got mom issues.
Just a bit. Safe to say.
That's actually not a bad point because there's it's like I was mentioned before. There's those dysfunctional family dynamics that go on. Like for example, the first time we see him, he says, it's daddy, and then he does the whole calling her mommy, and then he shifts it back basically. So that's actually not a bad point at all because I guess my answer is a little more unceremonious because I kind of took it as that he just like is just a legit psychopath where he was just born without any empathy. Maybe the tiniest bit, like maybe music kind of sets it off a little bit, but that's the only thing. That everything else, he just has no empathy, can't feel it. Just not that he can't, that he won't type of person.
Right. Let's talk about the music for a second. Obviously, Blue Velvet plays a big role. The song in this film. What do you reckon the better song is, Blue Velvet or Roy Orbison's In Dreams?
If we're going with the Isabella Rossellini rendition with Roy Orbison's In Dreams, then it's cutting close. But if we're going with the original Blue Velvet with In Dreams, then Roy Orbison wins out for me. And it's not even just the scene with Ben lip syncing it. It's just like there's just something about that song because David Lynch. It was before or during when he was filming. He heard the song on the radio and said, that song needs to be in the movie. I don't care how, we are putting that in the movie. So I think that despite the fact that Blue Velvet is such like a central part naturally to the movie, that there's something about David Lynch's insistence that just makes Sandman just, it makes In Dreams just resonate so much more for me.
Absolutely. And I think I read somewhere there was a bit of fuckery with how they sort of acquired the rights to that song, and Roy Orbison didn't know that the song was in the movie until he saw it at a cinema or something.
Oh,
he hated it the first time, and
That's right.
I don't know what it was, because I think I don't want to say he was a born again Christian, but there's a period where he went to go see it a second time. And he had this complete reevaluation. And when he found out that David Lynch was also into transcendental meditation, that actually just completely buried the hatchet with the two of them.
Oh, that's sweet.
no.
The candy-colored clown himself. What else can we say about Blue Velvet?
Well, I guess because this might be kind of where the crossover can occur with Perfect Blue, but the character of Dorothy Valens, because I guess that this is like a kind of soft, like, or more of a preemptive like crossover of what these two movies kind of coincide with, is that It's like Inland Empire's tagline, "A woman in trouble," and I feel like that really permeates with the character of Dorothy Valens and Mima in Perfect Blue.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely let's pick that up again when we talk about Perfect Blue. How do you reckon Dorothy Valens compares to other female characters that we've seen in Lynch works? So the likes of Laura Palmer or Alice / Renee from Lost Highway.
I would. It's sort of like. Oh, sorry, Vinny. You can go on.
I was gonna say it's like it's the idea of like the stage. Like I need to keep up appearances for the stage. Like with Laura Palmer, like she was the celebrity of the town. She was the queen. That perfect picture in that display case, just like who could ever believe that this girl was out partying, doing God knows what with as many people as she could. It was like the stage is what I am. This is what I need to present myself to the world because the truth is so dark. I never want to associate with it. So it's that idea of just you need to be stage ready because it's escapism for you. You can't just live in your life because your life is just utter pieces for you.
It's a great observation.
Great
Vinny.
observation.
Thank you.
No, it's for me. I look at it more so because early on in David Lynch's life, it's like that. It's like the scene when she's battered and naked. He actually experienced something very similar when he was younger. I forget how old he was, but him and his brother were out playing, and a naked battered woman came out, and his brother started instinctively crying, and then David Lynch was like strangely entranced by it. And again, it comes back to the idea that I view this movie as the blueprint for Lynch's filmography. Is that I feel like that was something that deeply stuck with him, and that's what really led to the framework of Dorothy Valens in particular. As for comparing to the other women in his filmography, I don't think I could do anything better than your comparison of Laura. But I guess I also think of the contrast of Dorothy to Sandy. Because Lynch has a very strong thing for blondes and brunettes, and there's always a contrast of sorts with them, like Mulholland Drive being probably a prime example.
Yeah,
so I
absolutely.
also think of the duality that it represents of what Dorothy represents to Jeffrey compared to what Sandy represents, because he never wants these two lives to ever intersect, and I just think that Sandy has that young purity, and then Dorothy just has this where she feels irreversibly damaged. And you see they're definitely dynamics that Lynch definitely plays out through his filmography one way or another. But yeah, because that's another one is that I think of the duality and how prominent that is. Very subtle, but still prominent in this movie.
And you can kind of tell in that scene where Dorothy is there and she's naked and he's clinging to Jeffrey. You can tell that he's kind of he's thinking oh God, don't say anything about our relationship, don't say anything, and he's so uncomfortable about it because Sandy's standing right there. Don't
say anything creepy like his disease is in me. Oh, you did say it. Well, God.
Speaking of creepy lines, there's a line that I love in Blue Velvet where Sandy sort of says to Jeffrey, I don't know if you're a detective or a pervert. His response is so funny to me. How does he respond? He just kind of says he gives it a sly look. He's like, well, that's for me to know and you to find out, baby. it's so funny.
It's definitely the facial expression Colin McLaughlin has that really sells it for me.
Yeah,
it just has that the subtly snarky grin of yeah, she caught me and I need to play it off.
I sort of read it as he's trying to be kind of flirty or hey kind of thing, but it's just he's just an idiot. It reminds me of personal anecdote time.
Ooh, I love these.
When I was about 17, 18, I was working in a shop, supermarket, and there was this one of the hot girls from school was came in and bought some things. I remember we used to have this energy drink called Black Stallion, and she was wearing a Black Stallion t-shirt for some reason. I can't remember what I said, but I think I said something like, "Oh, do you drink that shit? Is it any good?" And she's like, "Oh no, I've only got the t-shirt because I ride like a stallion like this." And I was just and I was such a dumbass. I just sort of said, "Oh, a Black Stallion," and I was like, and then she sort of gave me this weird look and left, and like later that night, I was just like, "Fuck! What the hell did I say that? That was so dumb."
Yeah, that didn't even come under or seem like a good idea at the time. I
No,
really don't
exactly.
think I
It's just-
follow up with that.
No, it was just like, yeah. So that's that's what a dumbass I was back in the day. Anyway, so it kind of reminded me of that for some reason.
Oh, that line is great, but also just Frank's line where he's asked like, "Hey, do you want me to pour the beer?" He's like, "No, I want you to fuck it." Those lines just had me dying.
Yeah, very funny lines.
But also I wanted to like when Jeff was telling him his drink of choice and he's like Heineken, and when he bursts out, it's like, "Heineken, fuck that shit." Do you guys know a song that samples that exact audio?
Is there no?
Because
I'm sure
there's more than a few out there.
I'm sure there's one. I did find out today that there's a song I really like by the band Ministry called "Jesus Built My Hot Rod," which samples I think it samples Frank saying, "Let's hit the fucking road." Awesome song. But no, I'm not aware of any. I'm sure that there is one, at least.
Because I have a song I have listened to for like over a decade at this point. It's Green Day covered My Generation by The Who. It was on their album
Really?
Kerplunked. And there's a part where like it's a guitar solo, then it just cuts that audio. "Heineken, fuck that shit." I never knew where it
Awesome.
was from, and when I heard it in this
amazing.
movie, I'm like, Green Day likes David Lynch. Mwah, perfect.
I love that. That's awesome. Are you a beer drinker, Colin?
Admittedly, I haven't been able to drink in years, but it's not anything like a previous addiction. It's just sort of like it's just kind of past my prime sort of thing.
No, I'm the same way. I very rarely drink. I'm curious to know though, what kind of reputation does Pabst Blue Ribbon have in the States? Because my understanding was
it's bad. It's basically just like water. I mean, to put it mildly, it's like, I don't know if it's just basically if you're underage. I don't want to say it's Keystone Light. It's like premium Keystone Light for us, where it's like it's not a good taste, but it has this weird dedicated following, I would say.
Yeah, because my understanding was that it was either a redneck beer or like a hipster beer. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like that weird crossover of like the fringes of both groups, and there's that crossover of people who buy Pabst Blue Ribbon. But the real shocker is that it's actually a lot bigger than you think.
It's a lot bigger, like in terms of the
In
terms of how
people who
popular
are
it was.
Very vocal about it. Yeah,
I thought
I
you were
feel
about like
that-
the size of the can or something.
I feel like it's a very negative connotation, but like it's like the same like I don't know, like handful of people keep buying it, so it's always just thriving.
Sure. Vinny's a big fan by the sounds of things. What's your opinion of Pabst?
I've never had it. I've only seen wrestlers sponsored by it. That's the only because I'm a huge wrestling fan. I see a lot of like indie wrestlers like sponsored by it. So they're like in the ring, like doing their thing. Then they have a spot where they grab a beer can of it, and just knock it over the other guy's head, like sponsored by Pabst.
That's really funny. Makes me laugh too when Jeffrey's snooping around in Dorothy's apartment and Sandy's honking the horn 4 times and he's too busy taking a leak. It's just like Heineken. It cracks me
It's
up.
so funny. But also, can we talk about like it's like just the reusing of names? Because we got Jeffries, we got Gordon, and I'm like, you are not the true Gordon. You're not the Gordon I love from Lynch. Get out of here.
Yeah.
You're just a yellow suit man. Which also, have you guys ever seen a person actually wear like a yellow blazer in real life? Because I never have. It's always in fiction.
Yeah, it's always in fiction from what I can think of as well.
There was a dude I know. He used to wear this yellow hat, and he had a pet monkey, and the monkey was very, very curious. True story. I did when I was 18. I got invited to a prom, I guess you'd call it, and I spent the most expensive piece of clothing that I've ever bought was a bright yellow, like bulldozer yellow polyester shirt, which I wore with a bright blue tie.
Why? Why did you choose that?
Because
I'm assuming the mid 2000s, and that was in vogue.
It was
actually, what year was this?
It was the early 2000s, and I was a fucking idiot. Was the explanation for that? Cost me $90, and it was like an authentic polyester yellow shirt from the 70s. It was horrible. It cost
How
me
long
lots of
did you
money.
keep that?
I kept it for a while, actually. Yeah, for quite a while, and it was horrible. It was like offensively bright.
That's the thing, is that men's styles in the early 2000s, for how good it was for women in the early 2000s, it was equally terrible for men.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's like this really weird counterbalance where it just, no matter, like, men's styles just like aged like milk from like 2000 to 2004, 2005.
Yeah, did you wear a trucker hat with the shirt and like Ed Hardy stuff with it?
Didn't wear Ed Hardy. I definitely, my wallet may have had a chain on it at some point.
Oh, I had a chain too.
Oh, okay. That was the 2000s, so that was unfortunately more socially acceptable than we'd like to remember.
Speaking of things I'd like to remember, sorry, I thought I had a more clever segue there.
Oh, come on.
Turns
Trey,
out I
come
didn't.
on. I just want to spotlight a young Laura Dern. She's great. Like, you had it at such
She
a
is
young
good.
age, Laura Dern. It's unfair. How are you so talented and you've sustained it all this time?
I had to look up how old Laura Dern was in this, because I thought
she was like
she must
18,
have been
19?
very young. I heard somewhere that she was like in her early mid-20s when she was in Jurassic Park. And
Yeah, she was like 27, I believe, when that was released.
Yeah.
She has that very mature-looking face where I feel like she's been like, I feel like she's been like 28 to like 42 her whole life.
Yeah.
And I mean that in the best way possible.
Absolutely.
Where it's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because I think of, like, for me, what I looked like at 27. I was like, man, I looked like a kid. And then, but yeah, she's still got a great thing going for her to this day. So I mean, my hat's off to her.
Absolutely. This is gonna sound really bad, but there's one bit of acting that she does which makes me laugh every time, and it's so bad, and it's because it's so exaggerated, and you can tell that she probably started this, really sort of, a lot more toned down, and Lynch was pushing her and pushing her and pushing her. It's a scene that we spoke on earlier when Dorothy reveals that her and Jeffrey have been a thing, and she just, like, her mouth just kind of contorts into this clown face.
I knew you were gonna bring that scene up.
Yeah.
The moment you said there's one scene, I was like, okay, I'm gonna let him say his thing, but I know where this is going.
Yeah. The first time I watched this was on VHS. The second time I watched this was not long afterwards, actually. They had this boutique theatre in Auckland had a retrospective screening, and I went and saw it with an audience. And it was wild to me how funny this film was with an audience. Like, people were cracking up. You're watching it alone, and it is dark, and there's horrible shit that's happening. But some parts of it are just so overblown and so exaggerated that it is farcical and it is comical. Yeah, and that was definitely one that that got a good response from the audience. That's for sure.
I couldn't help but laugh at the entire time when Frank is just beating the crap out of Jeff. There's just that woman just dancing on top of the car. It is insane, and I couldn't help but laugh so much at that. She's just into it, just grooving along while this man is putting on lipstick, kissing another man, and then beating that man.
Yeah, and I think this is the incongruous thing that sort of defines Lynch and, Lynchian as a style, is just that sort of incongruity between, it's just so out of place.
I think my favorite in terms of, I guess, subtle humor is that Jack Nance is, of course, in it. He's like,
yes,
I'm Paul. And he has to reiterate this at least one or two more times.
Yep.
Jack Nance just has this quality, and I don't do this because he shows up way too much in Twin Peaks, but every time I watch any of Lynch's films, barring Eraserhead, I just do like hey, it's Jack Nance, because he just has that presence that just, like, makes you feel better.
He's definitely he's that guy. Yeah, and he's very cool. What did you think of Jack Nance's appearance? Because I know you're a big Pete fan, Vinny.
Oh, I love if I could bring back a dead celebrity, it'd be Jack Nance. I don't care about anyone else. He's just so wholesome. It is that guy, and I love that he showed up at the end. Hey, Paul.
Yeah, that's right. Did you recognize the other one of Frank's cronies, the guy with sort of like the 80s hairstyle and the
I didn't.
skinny guy?
Brad Dourif, probably.
Brad Dourif, yeah. Do you know who that is, Vinny? Brad
Off the top of my
Dourif
head.
is the voice of Chucky.
Oh, that dude! That's awesome!
Yeah. He was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest as well. It was a very early role for him. I think did he win an Oscar for that? He might have been nominated at least.
He was nominated, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did that, and then he did The Elephant Man with naturally with Lynch, and I think he was also in Dune as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I've only watched Dune like maybe 2 times, so I can't really pinpoint where he was in that, but that was definitely him with the longer hair in Blue Velvet.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts on Blue Velvet before we transition?
Just a small little thing I caught on, where it was after the murder of Frank, and then like just everyone like getting back together. There's that one shot of just the light bulb just cutting out. I'm like, he has to do the electricity thing and everything, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I was saying before, is that like how I view this as a blueprint, where the electricity, that's really the one scene, but you can tell that's something that's been stuck in his mind for some time, and that's something that he would like just, expand way further on as time would progress.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to Perfect Blue. So she wore perfect blue velvet. Colin, I'm going to put you on the spot here, dude. And my apologies in advance. I'd like
That's
you.
Okay. I knew once I knew Vinny had to do it, I kind of knew that it was going to be my trajectory. I thought maybe there was like 10% chance it might shift back to him anyways, but I was braced for impact for at least the last half hour.
I can see that you're notably sweating on the other side of that Zoom window.
Actually,
this whole time,
as a bit of a side note, I actually do this thing where I turn off the AC, because I have a fan like literally right next to my computer. So that's the real, because there's times where it's like when I've interviewed like Amy Shields or Zoe McClain, I was like, I look at the videos like, I look terrible. I can't believe I look like this in front of people. And the thing's that it's sweltering where I live. It gets super hot no matter what time it is, even in the heat, because it just insulates. But so yeah, so it's this sweating thing. It's like the Super Mario Brothers movie where you see those natural beads of sweat. And that's not movie magic. That's like actually like no one has the AC.
the other Dennis Hopper masterpiece.
Yes.
Yep.
He was totally channeling Frank in that, though, wasn't he? He seriously was.
Oh, he was channeling Frank for the wrong reasons. He was just legit angry being on that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess before we get into Perfect Blue, a bit of a side note, I feel like it's well documented that Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo just drank their way throughout that movie.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that if Dennis Hopper didn't get through his alcohol addiction, he probably would have been on the same boat, because no one was happy being on that. But anyways, enough delays.
Let's do it. All right, 30 seconds. Do your best to recap this almost impenetrable film. All
right.
I'm going to count you down. 3, 2, 1, and go.
So Mima is a former pop star from the band Cham, and she makes her transition into being an actress because that's a more profitable trajectory for her. But as that goes on, that there's at least one stalker who's not quite happy with it, and as she does double bind, the vision of reality and dream just starts to blur more and more to the point of it being oblivion. And even when you get to the very end, it just raises more questions than answers.
Perfect.
Do I need to make any more?
No, that's perfect. That was
very
well done.
I wasn't sure
very
if it
well
needed
done.
to be very. Oh, very good.
No, fantastic stuff, Colin. That was great. And we'll get into this a little bit. Vinny, what's your history with this film?
So, like many an anime fan, I've watched like countless things. So this was probably during like me just binge watching a lot of anime on my laptop in high school in the middle of the night. So I remember. It's funny, like, during that time, I remember I watched a lot of anime. I couldn't tell you a lot about it. I just remembered, I really liked that. So, re-watching, I'm like, how did I watch this in the middle of the night and just calmly go back to sleep? Because, my God, this movie just... The idea that this is Satoshi Kon's directorial debut for a movie is like, this has to be one of the best first films for any director ever. Because this sticks with me. I can't stop thinking about it. Just the imagery, the music. This man is one of the best directors of all time, and he came out with an instant classic.
Yeah.
Actually, Vinny, I have one question. Because you're way more well-versed in anime than I am. Did you happen to read, I believe, Opus before Perfect Blue?
No, I read it since.
Because I know that he was... Okay, I've read Opus, and you can kind of see the maybe not the inspiration, but just kind of the mindscape of him and
Mm-hmm.
how he could carry that over so perfectly for a directorial debut. At least that was my takeaway when I read Opus.
I didn't know that Opus existed until I looked it up yesterday, so I'm gonna have to find that.
Yeah, you need to
'Cause
read
that'd
it,
be
Craig, because you will dig it so much.
awesome. This is for anyone who's unfamiliar. This is Satoshi Kon's manga that he
Yeah.
made. Is that what it was? Yeah.
Yeah, he even had a bit of an epilogue slash coda about how he couldn't continue out the story because he had to work on Perfect Blue.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
right.
this was like legitimately the last project he did before he dived into filmmaking.
Nice. Cool. So was that your kind of introduction to it, Colin? You read the manga first and then saw this out, or how did that happen?
I ended up reading the manga afterwards. I first watched Perfect Blue in 2015, and it was really hard to find at that time.
Yeah.
Because I think a
Yeah.
lot of people forget that it wasn't until either the 20th or 20. Well, actually, this would be the 25th anniversary, so it was indeed the 20th, where now it's readily available on Blu-ray and digital.
Yeah.
It was super hard to find for the longest time. Like it
Yeah.
was kind of produced in mass in on VHS. And it had a very substandard, to say the best, DVD release that was hard to find.
Yeah.
So I ended up finding it. There was a period where on YouTube, like there would just be full anime films just
Yep.
readily available in 2015. And I was like, oh, this one doesn't have a giant lens flare on it. I can watch this before it's taken down. And that was my first foray into Perfect Blue. And
Wow.
to be fair, it was a very good quality. It was luckily this person was nice enough to have an HD.
That's
So and also it was the
beautiful.
Japanese version as well. So
Nice.
it really helped. Oh, no, wait, I'm trying to think. I think I definitely watched the English version at one point, and it does not hold up.
Right.
Yeah,
No.
there's a lot of anime where, or at least when I watch foreign, any foreign animated movies, I pick the native language because for every Studio Ghibli film, you get a lot of bad stuff. And even Studio
Yeah.
Ghibli, like Grave of the Fireflies, I've heard that's so bad with its English translation that you're better off not watching it.
Wow. Okay.
And to be fair, I remember the English version being for Perfect Blue being okay, but Mr. Me Mania that was like egregiously bad. It was like
Yeah.
unintentionally
Yeah.
funny at a time when it should not
Yeah.
be. And this isn't like Blue Velvet where you can laugh at it because Lynch is kind of poking at it.
It's over-exaggerated,
This
yeah.
is just a oversight from
Yeah.
the translators.
Yeah, I agree. I watched this film probably around the same time as I watched Blue Velvet, but I didn't remember a thing about it. Like, not a thing. I think I watched it on VHS one night, and yeah, I didn't remember a damn thing about it. And then I rewatched it again last night. I had to, find a dodgy stream of it because it's, in New Zealand, it's a lot harder to find stuff than it is in other places in the world. And it was the English dubbed version, and it was fine. But I totally agree with you, Colin. That scene with the stalker, where he finally talks, was just like, "What is this voice? This sounds like a fucking Muppet or something." Like, it's crazy.
So apart from that scene, I've kind of oppressed everything else that I feasibly could from that English version.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's but like of course, putting aside anything about the translation, this is just it's such a hard movie you know to tap into because from beginning to end, it's incredibly subversive. Because I think of like the Powertron part, like you can kind of guess that's not going to be like a movie within a movie, or that's what this movie's about. But it does kind of set the precedent that there's always going to be a shift in tone and a shift of what you think the movie's going to really be about.
I love that. I love that. I mean, when I started watching the film, and there's the Power Ranger type people on screen, I'm just like, God, did I pick the right movie? And then it sort of, and then it became apparent what it was. But there's a few points in the film where something's happening and you think it's a scene that's happening to Mima in her real life or whatever, and then it is revealed that it's she's shooting a scene. The scene where she's walking down the road and the guy comes up and he's like, "Oh, hey, have you ever considered doing any modeling or whatever?" And
Yeah.
and I remember watching it and I was thinking, like, wouldn't she be more recognizable than this? Or why is she, why wouldn't she say, "Oh, well, actually, I'm an actor" or whatever? And then it gets revealed that she's shooting a scene. I'm like, oh, okay, makes sense.
Not sure if this is worth mentioning, and I guess this is more so about actors kind of like on an international level, is I think of years ago, Dan Radcliffe, when he was at the prime of being in Harry Potter, he actually talked about how he could go out in public and no one would ever bug him. Like, never even gawking at him. And I think that definitely in the U.S., that is, that is something that can't really be done. There's a reason why celebrities are just like all confined to like these like massive mansions.
Yeah.
But I know at an international level, it's a little bit different. And I feel like I understand enough about Japanese culture, but I don't really know how they view, any like famous like musicians or actors. So I can't confirm or deny, but I kind of just accepted that part on a whim.
And it's interesting. And I mean, I feel like when she was in Cham, it didn't strike me as a band that was like, huge. Like they weren't like, God, I don't even know what the big J-pop bands are these days. But they weren't a massive band. They were doing okay, and they had, I mean, even like the size of the audience in their concert was not massive. Right. It was a fairly small crowd.
Yeah, the thing that I really stood out to me yesterday is that when I was watching it, I started thinking about how just weird it is that it's like basically a bunch of mid-30s men onward.
Yes.
Like there should be a band that should be like for like middle schoolers and under.
Yeah.
And it's basically just a bunch of guys that are just kind of like talking about like this petty gossip. And this is something that permeates throughout the whole movie. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking that, last night when I was watching, I thought, wow, this is a much bigger thing. And also kind of more prominent now than it was in 1997. I mean, to be fair, I don't know what it was like, in Japan at that time. But I feel like either Satoshi Kon, either he saw this coming a mile away, or he just saw this like in certain fandoms, for lack of a better term, because these guys are really like the neckbeards of the 90s. Like before neckbeards were really a thing, it's like these guys. Because the thing is that on Mima's room, they talk about how she just celebrated her 21st birthday. And for me, it's like, I think of at my age now, I'm like, oh, wow, I guess 21 is really young. And you think of like how much older those guys are. Yeah. I know I'm really harping on this, but there's really something about, I didn't really think of how prominent the transition was for her being a singer to an actress, because in it, they do talk about how it's not a profitable line of work, where she's really better off. They never say that these are bad roles, but they're kind of like middle tier at best and kind of bottom of the barrel at worst.
Yeah.
They sort of bring up like, she's only got one line, or, there's that,
because
kind of thing.
She has two agents where it's, of course, there's Rumi. I mean, we'll get to Rumi when we have to, but I believe it's Mr. Todokoro, where he's trying to be practical, and he's pushing boundaries that he probably shouldn't, but he's also the more practical of the two. So when he talks about how all of them talk about how acting is the natural progression for her, that this was not a decision that was taken lightly by anyone.
Let's cycle back to the otaku would be the term, sort of culture. Yeah. Vinny, what was using your extensive experience as a weeb, what was kind of happening around that time with otaku culture and stuff, and how do you reckon Perfect Blue kind of addresses that?
It addresses it perfectly with the rise of the internet. Just like, you can have all this information all at once. Here's chat rooms. Here's where you can discuss, like, this just happened today with people across the country. So it really was he was right on the money with that. Just her getting a Mac to see, like, oh, what's this thing about me? And just people discussing, like, her daily life. And also just that idea of that ownership. Like, no, this person's mine. Like, they make content for me, but this person is mine. And also, Craig, I wanted to touch base with you on how in 1997 this came out, but also End of Ava came out, and how the opening of that is very similar, where this is what happens with female characters you idolize and what you do to them. Like, no spoilers for Colin, because I want him to experience End of Ava, but also it was this idea of, here's this prominent female person, and here's what I think of you guys, what you do to them.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I didn't make that connection, but yeah, you're absolutely on the money there. And Colin, I've changed my mind. I think you should just immediately watch the film End of Evangelion.
Just scar the boy.
No, is this gonna be like a Fire Walk With Me thing, where it's like it front loads to the most terrifying thing, and then it kind of spoils it, but it kind of springboards in another way?
No, I'm being completely facetious, Colin. You should absolutely not do that. Okay. No, just slight tangent. So the trajectory of Evangelion is that it starts off as a giant robot show. It slowly gets into some weird esoteric space, which is just fascinating. And then End of Evangelion is like a surrealist masterpiece. So don't dive right into that film. I do want to pick up on what you were saying though, Vinny, about how, I guess, ahead of its time this film was. I have a real soft spot for, I guess, early internet films. Yeah, and most of them are terrible. The Net with Sandra Bullock,
Yeah.
love that shit.
Oh.
It's so bad.
That shit. I wish the internet was like that.
Yeah, like the idea of the internet is you are flying through a virtual city and picking files out of a digital file. It's so funny.
Or I think Hackers is probably the
Hackers,
only one
yes.
where it aged so poorly that it came back around to being
Yes.
like
Yes.
a masterpiece.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think of Macaulay Culkin. He said that that in the case of Hackers, it aged like a fine wine that's been stuck in the freezer for 20 years. And I really think there's no other way to put it.
That's a great way to put it. What I will say though is that I think that and it did make me laugh when early on in Perfect Blue, I think Rumi was saying, "Oh, yeah, no, there's a thing about you on the internet," and then me was like, "Oh, the internet! I hear that's really popular these days." And then Ruby's trying to explain what the internet is, and me was just like, "Oh, I don't understand URLs. Why can't you talk English?" It's so funny.
It's the most 1997 scene that could feasibly exist in this movie.
Absolutely.
And to be fair, like of course, the internet was a new thing at that time, so of course there's a lot of leeway, but. That's the only thing for a movie that's so far ahead. It's really the only scene that feels dated, but also it feels necessary as well to set off what Mima has to go through in this movie.
And I think it was probably perfect for the time because early on in 1997, the world wasn't as connected as it was now. It was still, the internet had been around a little while, but it was still relatively in its infancy. But I think what's really impressive about this film is that it almost predicted stuff which is happening kind of now.
That's what I was thinking as well.
Things like Mima has these different kind of personas or these kind of personalities, and that's manifested as the idol and the actress and the person. I guess it's similar to sort of the construction that we all do around our social media presence. The part with the stalker and how he kind of feels the sense of ownership over her. That's a real. I guess the term for that is kind of a parasocial relationship. So when you feel that you can have a conversation with people that you listen to on a podcast or whatever, shout out to everyone. Hey, how you doing? I see you. Parasocial relationships like that. It almost predicted that. Even things like online identity theft, I guess, is that's an element of here which happens on the internet now. This idea that you have a level of access to these people for the first time ever, that are famous and that that don't know you, but you feel like you know them. It predicted all this stuff so well, and that early, it's incredible.
That was something that was on my mind yesterday about when she goes on Mima's room, and it's like someone knows her in such like a bizarrely meticulous manner. That's really not that far off from like we'd say like Instagram influencers, for example, where they have this massive following and people, at least through that lens, seems to understand them in a very needlessly specific manner. And it really did showcase just how scary it could be of that. You're saying about that parasocial relationship.
Are you guys aware of I caught this on a video essay that I watched about Perfect Blue last night. Are you guys aware of the stalker who was stalking the singer Bjork in the late 90s?
I've heard of it in passing, but I don't know the finer details.
Yeah, so it was a young man who was obsessed with Bjork. Young guy, unemployed, overweight. He was a bit of a recluse, and I think this is before the internet was kind of widespread. So he would absorb information about her through imported magazines and stuff like that. He developed this really unhealthy obsession with her. And I think he considered himself a bit of an artist, and a bit, he would make these video diaries and, talk about his obsession with Bjork. One day he discovered that Bjork was in a relationship with the rapper producer Tricky, who is a black man. He had some pretty grim things to say about that. And he decided that Bjork had been, I guess, tainted. And he constructed a parcel bomb which he intended to send to her, and he sent this bomb to her basically, and then he locked himself in a room for a few days, slowly through his video diaries, which are available online. I wouldn't recommend them, but he basically you could see him becoming more and more unhinged and psychotic, and he ended up blowing his head off with a shotgun on camera. The parcel was intercepted, and so Bjork never received it. But it's kind of a horrifying thing that happened around the same time that this film was being developed. And I don't know if any of that was known to Colin or the people that were making the film or anything like that. But it's kind of this weird, creepy parallel. Someone that was obsessed with a celebrity that they thought they knew and felt, I guess, a degree of ownership from, and I guess they didn't have much else going in their life. They didn't have much, there was probably some mental instability there, and it's just a horrible, horrible situation for everybody involved. Yeah. Sorry to bring that downer into the conversation.
It's okay,
To
Craig.
be fair, it's pretty understandable why it was brought up, because it's as we were saying before, there's those really scary parallels, and I think that's what makes this movie, because obviously it's a psychological thriller, so there's enough terror in that regard, but I think the realism is also what kind of adds to that as well.
And it's interesting, you talk about realism in a film where the line between reality and fiction, or and artifice is always in question. Yeah. Do you think if you guys were hungry, do you think you would order dinner from a place called Big Body Pizza?
Yes.
Not after this, no.
I just think, what a strange name for a pizzeria. Like, were they advertising how unhealthy they are, or what's going on with that?
I know, it sounds American to me, so yeah.
You guys have Fat Burger, I guess, over there, don't you?
Hell yeah, we do. It's awesome.
Is it?
I guess on the topic, because since you all brought up Big Body Pizza, because I imagine since this movie blurs the line, we could probably more so with Blue Velvet kind of shift back and forth.
Yeah.
Is that the photographer that she that is killed? I actually think that out of all the bodies in it, that's the only one that Mima actually killed, because
Oh, you reckon?
one of the things I thought of yesterday when I watched is that it's going back and forth between her last performance with Cham and then her at the supermarket and going home.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought that maybe it was a artistic merit of Satoshi Kon wants you to feel this jarring feeling early on. But I also started thinking that maybe this is the way that Mima views the world. That because I was thinking about yesterday is that what if this movie's about like an unchecked mental illness that Mima has, Rumi has, Mr. Mimania has, and it's all a springboard because of her jump to become an actress. Because when you see her in the reflection, and it's that Mima and Cham that's talking to her about how filthy she is and how she's not making the right decision, and it's really not that far off, if not already identical to how she feels personally, and with her just feeling so down and out about, is this the right decision to do? And the acting gig is just like the most abhorrent roles that she could take on. And it also doesn't help the fact that Double Bind just seems to parallel her feelings as well. And it seems like the script is kind of just happens to be go along with it. And then that's not even going the fact that Mr. Mimania, it's like you were saying before about the Bjork stalker, where there's that sense of ownership. And also he has the quote unquote real Mima kind of reaffirming his biases as well. Yeah. I mean, he even in that realm, there's still a lot of unforgivable stuff that he does. Really one scene, but then Rumi, I think that that was something else where is that, of course, at the end of the movie, she comes out dressed as Mima from Cham. And the thing is that I wondered, because one of the things I was back and forth on about is that would these symptoms have been really obvious early on, or was this, like I was saying before, something that set off because maybe her career was going fine enough in Cham, and then the actress thing just completely threw a wrench into it for her in particular? Sorry, I know, I just realized I just had this massive information dump of a psychological thriller. But,
no, it's interesting to think about. I mean, and I guess that kind of speaks to, I mean, you think about, I guess, celebrity culture more broadly. You think about, people that were, I mean, you brought up Macaulay Culkin before. You think about people who were famous as a child, and and the steps that they will often take to establish themselves as a credible adult actor, or not adult film actor, but you know what I mean. Like just trying to
they
think
do
of
a
an
film
example.
instead of a movie. That type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Or they'll take on an edgy role.
Like someone doing Showgirls.
Yeah, like a certain Saved by the Bell star doing Showgirls with
Colin.
it also
Craig
has
loves
Kyle
Showgirls.
MacLachlan as well.
Have you guys seen that film recently?
I haven't
I've
watched
never
Showgirls.
watched it, but-
Craig, why would I watch it recently? Craig, I don't love it as much as you.
Honestly, it is one of the funniest films you'll ever see. It is hysterical. It's such a trashy good time. I really like Showgirls a lot. It's so much fun.
Man, that's a sense I never thought I'd hear in the 2020s, but I'll take your recommendation.
Yeah, so that's my recommendation. Neon Genesis Evangelion and Showgirls.
If you play them at the exact same time, look for the similarities.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, this is rapidly veering off course. What else can we say?
Like, it's named Perfect Blue, but also the use of red in this film.
That's exactly something that was on my mind yesterday. It's like, yeah, for a movie called Perfect Blue, red is like a much more prominent use of color. And I think that I was talking about someone last week when is that I feel like Satoshi Kon and David Lynch, they kind of tap in the same vein of creativity. Like, I'm sure Satoshi Kon had, of course, derived a lot of inspiration from Lynch, but I feel like in the case of red, maybe it's like different for the way they use it, but there's definitely a firm sense of foreboding where even scenes where it looks kind of innocuous, that there's something else at play.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I noticed that Mima's apartment, there is a lot of stuff that's red that's like prominent throughout it, and again, it's like through innocuous scenes of like her just coming home, putting stuff away. And you think that there's just something, because that room definitely feels more menacing as the movie progresses. And a lot of the most visible confusion I felt was during her scenes in that apartment.
And I mean, I could be way off on this, but when she wakes up the final time and Rumi's dressed in this, in her outfit or whatever, is that Rumi's place? Like, is that Rumi's apartment?
That's
so
how
she's
I
modeled.
That was,
so she's modeled that apartment on Mima's room. So she's made a copy of Mima's room.
That's actually, and I thought, because I remember there's that period near the end where they say, "Oh, you came over yesterday," and I thought it was just Rumi coming over to see Mima. So I thought that scene at the very end was, it was always Mima's. I never thought it was actually going to Rumi's. And who knows? Maybe it's like Rumi. It's like that creepy Arnold shrine from Hey Arnold of some creepy quasi voodoo Mima that no one else can ever see.
Wow. Okay. You weren't expecting a Showgirls reference. I wasn't expecting a Hey Arnold jab there. Nice. Yeah, so we sort of touched on that Mima was doing some, wanted to pursue acting, and it starts out as kind of these small, nothing roles, but eventually gets expanded into really edgy stuff, including a pretty harrowing scene where she's filming a rape scene. This is a really grim scene to watch, not just because of the sexual assault that's kind of happening, or the simulation of a sexual assault that's happening in the scene. There was a bit where the action's taking place, and it the way that it's filmed is that you are seeing effectively what the camera on set would be seeing, and then the director calls cut and everything just kind of stops, but the actors have to like stay in place. And, the director's like, well, we're resetting the cameras, everyone stay put. And, the actor that's playing the rapist is, has his hand on Mima's breast and, is like, oh, sorry about this. And she's like, oh, it's fine. And she just kind of stares blankly off and, at that light. Just, I don't know, that really, I don't know what to say, it's more disturbing than the rape scene, but just the detachment and the how she picks it up again, it just I don't know, it just really it's really unsettling. And
because that's also the time when we see Mr. Totokoro like really like kind of break down and kind of realize that this was actually a really bad idea to have her take on this role, because I think they're like, the times are changing and we need to do something sustainable, but I think that's the time when he realized that the bottom line is not the most important thing for him, even in his profession.
Yeah,
right.
And the scene that comes immediately after is, she's, tries to feed her fish and then realizes that all the fish have died, and that's what kind of breaks her, and just all of that, just horrible trauma, I guess, that she had been trying to push aside. It just comes sort of flooding in. It's so effective.
One of the things I was thinking of since we brought up the fish is I feel like the fish are deceptively more central to the movie than it probably appears, because the first thing, and this kind of comes back to the idea of how Mima views the world, is that the first thing we see her say is like, "Oh, I forgot to feed you yesterday." And then it shows her feeding the fish again, then it shows them dead, and then they're alive again. And I guess you can make the argument that she off-screen bought them, or, bought new fish, but I still took this as like an indicator of, where Mima's headspace is at and what's going on in her life, and the fish are a way to decode it, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, potentially. Unless we subscribe to the theory that, Rumi's created a parallel room which has live fish in it, maybe.
Okay, that's what I always...
That's actually a really interesting point.
I always took it as when she wakes up in that room, like, she feels something's off. Then when she looks out the window, that's when it hits her that this isn't her place, because that's when she's like, wait, Rumi, what are we doing here? And then that's when, the reveal of her in the costume. So that's what I always took, where she saw the fish, looked outside, this isn't my room.
And there's also, I guess, another clue is too, early on in the film, she takes down the Cham poster off the wall, but then in that scene, the poster's on the wall. So I wonder if that's, I wonder if we'll crack something here. Yeah.
I guess on kind of to reaffirm that is that there's that part where it's like the 2 consecutive days that Rumi, at least we'll say for now, quote unquote, comes over, but it shows she wakes up to the exact same thing being reported on the news, like, hey, we have this Japanese group index, and this is what it's going to be. And that was one where I was like, okay, if there's one thing that I have a hard time explaining, it's why she's waking up to this exact news, but with a different thing going on. Because, I felt like I was like getting a little comfortable with like how I felt about it, but the news thing, that was one where I just didn't really know how to decode or how to look at or how to approach it.
I love kind of the repeating stuff like that, like those sort of parallel scenes, and it kind of echoes when she's sitting there practicing her lines and she's saying the same line over and over and stuff again.
I also want to talk about, this has one of my favorite cuts ever in a movie, where it's when she's in the studio and then she slowly sees the stalker come up and get closer to her, and just that instant where he grabs the face, then it cuts to Rumi closing the trunk.
Yeah.
Like, it's that just immediate, just like, because in that moment, the first time you watch is like, did he just put her in the trunk? No, it's Rumi. Rumi's putting something in the trunk. And then that's when she talks to the manager about another racy scene. It's like, this is telling you how she's about to kill him, because he just brought up how there's more scenes like that for her. Like, well, of course he's the next one dead. And he is, along with the stalker man, who's also dead because he completed his purpose.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, because one of the things I was thinking of with Mr. Me Mania yesterday is that, I think up until yesterday, I thought of, like, the assault he does on her is, like, unquestionably a thing that's actually happening. And correct me if I'm wrong, because, like, he clearly, like, rips off her clothing, but in that show she comes out and it's, like, not only is it fine, but I think it's a different color as well.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of, like, that connection. Yeah, I was thinking about that connection of, like, because at first I thought maybe Mr. Me Mania, either he died when that hammer hit him, or maybe he failed and Rumi killed him, to dispose his body alongside with Mr. Totokoro. I just wasn't sure if you both had a particular take on that instance.
I guess there's another parallel here, because the scene where she smacks him in the head with the hammer, it's kind of like he's not dead, but he's not alive at the same time. Like, he's kind of like just in the state of shock, functionally alive, but something's missing. It kind of reminded me of the yellow man at the end of Blue Velvet, where he's kind of standing there, he's bleeding out the side of his head, and he's just kind of standing there, and then he only reacts to something when his radio goes off or whatever. Yeah, it was kind of similar to that.
But it's also like he got hit in the head and he had to go take his spot in, like, the narrative where he had to find his place where he dies. Like, he just kind of
to meet his mark.
Yeah, reacted to it, then just got into his mark. Like, that was another thing that I caught on with this viewing of it.
Just going back to what you were saying before, Vinny, about, like, some of those transition shots and some of those match shots and stuff. Yeah, there's so many good, like, transitions in this film. There's a really cool one. I mean, we talked about, the early on, the very first thing you see is, like, some Power Rangers thing, which makes you think, is this the kind of anime that I'm getting into? Which gets subverted. And then later on, there's like there's a close up of, like, some wide-eyed anime girl, and you're like, oh, what's happening here? And then it's revealed that it's just it's a picture on a sliding door, and the three guys that are just, like, narrating on the just commenting on what's happening to the characters and stuff, you know, through what they've read in gossip magazines or whatever. There's this really interesting kind of like Greek chorus, I guess, of you know, just people that giving exposition in this weird way. Something will happen where it will establish, you know, we're looking at one thing, and then it just pulls the rug out from under you. So it's so well done. It's masterful.
Also, I was thinking like another like thing I got from both of these with Blue Velvet and Perfect Blue was how the ending is like, it makes sure to let you know that the woman who was hurting the entire time is okay, where with Blue Velvet it ends with Dorothy happily with her son, whereas this one, it's Mima visiting Rumi in the mental hospital, and it's kind of like this thing where it's like, oh, how is she doing? And then it's like, how do you feel about it? Well, she's the woman who made me who I am today. And then like she just rides off in the sunset. It's like that they're both kind of getting on, wanting to show you that in the end, the woman who was suffering the most was all right at the end, which is this weird like similarity I picked on.
I feel like they come off as happy endings, but they're actually extremely unsettling. Because in the case of Blue Velvet, I guess I'll explain the Robin. I don't know if you guys know the story about the Robin, but when it shows the Robin with the bug, what happened was a Robin hit a bus that day, and David Lynch basically effectively taxidermied it himself, and he was the one puppeteering it. That's why
of course that happened. That's so obvious.
And I think, because they talk about it's like, oh, you know, it's like, I didn't know bugs do that. And I think that's sort of to set a precedent of how just kind of like off things are going to be. Like, it looks nice, but some are off. But then you see that scene at the end where she's with Donnie at the playground. Yeah. And then it cuts from playing the Julie Cruz song to the last lyrics are Dorothy Valance saying, "There's always be blue velvet through my tears." And it's like, this is not really a happy ending. Like, this is going to be someone like her and her son are going to like deal with this for the rest of their lives. And to transition that sort of like less than that deceptively somber ending is that in the case of Perfect Blue, she does, of course, you know, we see Mima go into check up on Rumi, but there's that part where when she walks out, it's like, what? That can't be Mima, her here of all places. And I guess on a light note, it does imply that her career has skyrocketed since that point, and also the hair growth kind of reaffirms that. But then there's that part where she looks in the mirror, and it's almost like a fourth wall break moment of where she looks at the audience and says, "No, I'm real." And the creepy part is that it's actually not the voice actress who played Mima that said that. It was actually the voice actress of Rumi. So if you ever wondered why that last line sounded different, and it really makes you think of like, oh man, what does that imply?
Yeah.
It took me 5 or 6 years to figure that out. I was like, no! Like, I knew something was wrong because there's, you know, in a movie that's as like, that goes far off the grid as this, there's no real fourth wall breaking moments, but then they save it for the end, and they have this very upbeat, chipper saxophone song, which is a good song, but it's not what you would expect from this type of movie. But when you think of the voice actress being Rumi instead of Mima, it makes you just think, oh no, this can't be anything good.
Yeah, kind of questions everything.
I was going to say, Craig, look, the other 1997 movie where the voice actor isn't acting in that moment.
Ooh, okay. Let's move quickly along from that. Yeah, no, I was just going to echo a lot of that, especially with the Robins, which are established as, you know, the Robins, they're, you know, as a symbol of love and, you know, all this kind of stuff. But, I mean, it's clearly a fake Robin. It's clearly an engineered Robin, and it's, you know, it's got this bug in its mouth, which, you know, implies that there's something, you know, that's something a little bit off. It's not, you know, there's always going to be this little bit of doubt or this little bit of something else. When I watched the ending of Perfect Blue, and this is probably just me showing what an idiot I am, for some reason I thought that, you know, but I think it's because Mima does have the longer hair. You know, my initial thought was, wait, is that the other actress that was in the show?
Double bind, probably.
Yeah.
To be fair, I can understand that, because I mean, to be fair, there's so much to unpack from that last 20 minutes that it's really not out of the realm of possibility that this would just be a scene from Double Bind.
Mm-hmm. Or and that got me thinking, well, you know, was that actress another persona of hers or something along those lines? But I think it probably is more obvious that it, you know, just was that she just does have long hair for, you know, to show time passing and all that kind of stuff. But it did raise that question of, well, is this a happy ending, or is there more to this than meets the eye? And that's what I love about these filmmakers, is that, you know, that there is this ambiguity, and you know, and often that a happy ending has these kind of question marks around it, even if they're subtle.
And that's the thing, is that you come back to this stuff and you watch it on a semi-regular basis for years, and then there'll be a thing that makes like, oh wait, this thing that I thought I had kind of figured out, I just like, it throws a wrench into it.
A little, there's a little detail that just throws everything out the window. So good.
I guess since we're kind of in the crossover of comparing, contrasting, I don't know if you were thinking this, but I was thinking about how prominent the topic of voyeurism was for both movies, and how there's a different approach to both of them. Because in Blue Velvet, Jeffrey Beaumont, there's a bit of selfish motivation, but you can tell that there's a certain sympathy he has for Dorothy, even if it's misguided. But then you have voyeurism in Perfect Blue, where of course there's Mr. Me Mania, who's the more immediate problem, but there's a ton of people reading this stuff, and it's all, and she starts finding out that it's like, it's not just dead on accurate, but just becomes completely wrong as well. So there's that trickle down effect of, not only is this guy chasing me, but like, it's just like damaging my image, and it's just like, you know, skewing her view of the world. And the fact that it's called Mima's Room is actually what just adds to that parallel for me as well.
What do you think, Vinny? Any thoughts on voyeurism? I know this is a topic close to your heart.
I hate you, Craig. No, just I was also thinking that, because I was thinking also another thing with, they were like, Jeffrey was doing it because he was concerned about well-being of the woman, whereas the stalker did it from like a negative place, like, no, I need to consume, this is mine, this is who I need to look over. Just like going back to that first shot of just her dancing and just being in the palm, in his palm, is like, I always go back to, like, that's just within seconds, you know everything about that man, what he feels about her, how he views her. Just that one shot of the palm is like, I love it.
I think
the scare. Oh, sorry, Craig, you go on.
Oh, just really quickly, I think that character might have one of the most unsettling character designs I've ever seen in animated films. Like, he just is, I don't know if it's the teeth or the high cheekbones or the tiny eyes.
For me, the eyes are like in two different zip codes at any given moment. And just where it's like drawn on him, it just feels it's too far off even from the anatomy of the head we see.
It's a total uncanny valley kind of thing. It's deeply unsettling.
I think that in the case, and this is way less applicable to Mima and more so to Rumi and Mr. Me Mania, but there's like this weird, like, perverse justification that they have. Like, there's the quote-unquote real Mima saying, she's the imposter, you need to kill her. And he thinks he's doing the right thing. And it's like I was saying before, is that even the realm of that mindset, the fact that he thinks he can, like, sexually assault, like, the quote-unquote fake Mima is a very creepy, just, you know, just jump in logic for him. And then conversely, we have Rumi, where I think that it's safe to say that she sees a lot of herself in Mima, to say, you know, one way or another. And I think that she sees that Mima taking on these different roles is basically like an attack on her as well, and that like this needs to be vanquished. And it's very scary, because, you know, with Jeffrey, he has a lot of missteps in his Odyssey, but you can tell that he at least wants to do the right thing. He just doesn't really know how to do it. But it's very scary to think how Rumi and Mr. Me Mania just have this like perverse justification for everything they do.
Yeah, I mean, with Jeffrey, it's like, you know, this is like a fun adventure. You know, he's, you know, it's a cool mystery, and you know, he's, Rumi and Mr. Mimania, I think, just have this, like you said, they feel that they know who the real Mima is, and they have this view of who the real Mima is. And again, this is another thing which is so topical now, is that, you know, in this age where we are putting ourselves out there, or putting aspects of ourselves out there into the world, you know, how much of that is authentic and how much of that is real, and what is the real sense of a person. It's one of those philosophical questions that, you know, don't have a clear answer. And I'm no philosophy major, but it's just one of those things, and which has been amplified by the internet. And I think, Satoshi Colin and his crew was just so prescient with that back in 1997.
It's really, it's like when you see George Carlin stand up from the mid '90s, where it's like, oh, they're talking about the world today, but then you realize like, oh wait, they saw this, like they saw the writing on the wall, and they just knew like the worst case scenario that this would happen. Because it's like you were saying before, there's movies like The Net or Hackers where it's a very out of touch way of how the people thought. Like for example, in Hackers, it's like my handle. It's like it's just a username. Like it's not your handle is not like a cool identity. It's not this thing you're gonna be like this edgy cyberpunk type of thing. It's just a bunch of words on a screen that look good. But no, Perfect Blue, out of all the '90s movies, this does the most remarkable job of just basically just seeing what the internet could be in its worst possible ways.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's like we were touching on before, is that the shift of Mima's career probably had to do with the fact that the demographic for Cham wasn't quite what it's supposed to be, and how that was also a thing that may or may not have been influenced by the internet as well.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a really interesting. Yeah, that's a really good point.
I forget, and forgive me if it's J-pop stars or even AV stars, but I know that you're basically, it's kind of like here in the US with Suicide Girls, is that it's kind of in your contract to say that you can't date.
Yeah.
And I forget who it was, but there was one Japanese model where she was found just in the streets with her boyfriend in Tokyo. And there's this video of her with her shaved head crying. You'd think this was like an ISIS video from like 2014, but she's like, I'm sorry that you caught me with my boyfriend. And it's like, I'm sorry I tainted my image. And it's a very tough career to do anything entertainment related because of this type of audience that Cham was facilitating.
God. I'm just thinking this is the first time I've thought about Suicide Girls in a while.
No, I was gonna say you looked very deep in thought, but
I absolutely was.
But there's definitely something weird about how that has to be like in a contract of you can't be seen dating. If you're married, you can't have a ring. And you think that in the case of like when it's a bunch of 35 plus to middle-aged men just going to this stuff, it really does show that there's like, I don't know if co-opting is the right word, but there's just something not right with the market, and there's and it's kind of like changing the trajectory. And I guess the other one that's probably worth mentioning is that when she leaves Cham, it strange enough seems to become more successful, because her last one was at just some rinky-dink, like just like, oh hey, here's this like
small audience,
I don't know, Memorial Park tier type of venue. And then, I mean, not that 83 on a top 100 is like a massive splash, but it's still a pretty good footing.
They made the charts, for the first time. I think it would be less realistic if they, jumped to the top 10 from relative obscurity. But
it's like that realistic success. I think that's what really compounds Mima of thinking like, was this the right thing? Because it shows that when they're on that radio show, you see that fake Mima just like in it as well. And it's like it really, and that was something I was thinking about yesterday, is that wow, this really rubs salt in the wound of all the work she's doing, because this is like right before she starts doing the modeling as well.
Yeah, put yourself in her position there. You've worked at a certain career for so long, and then you make the decision to leave that, and then your group that you're with starts finding some degree of success. And I mean, the first thing that would go through my mind was, well, is that as a result of me leaving? Was I the thing that was holding this back, or did I get off at the wrong time? It would be a real dilemma.
Yeah, Rumi, she was talking about how when Mr. Todokoro starts saying like, oh, she needs to make that jump to being an actress, she's like, oh, what about all those lessons she had for singing? It's very much explicit saying that she really just did everything she could to get to where she is at that point. Yeah, and then to just completely change her career, only to find that her former bandmates are doing just as thriving. That can't be a good feeling.
Yeah. God, what a film, guys. Right? Like, seriously, what a movie.
Like, every time I watch a Satoshi Kon film, like, he has probably the best filmography. Only a handful of films before he passes away, but my God, this man was born to direct.
I think we mentioned it when we covered Paprika. Like, I don't think this guy made a bad film. I haven't seen all of his films, but from what I've heard, I don't think this guy made a bad film.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's Perfect Blue, Paprika, and Tokyo Godfathers. There might be a fourth one I'm missing.
Millennium Actress, that's the other one.
Millennial Actress, that's what it is. Because I'm thinking that Tokyo Godfathers came out was around the mid 2000s,
2003-ish. Yeah.
Paprika
Yeah,
was the last one
so
in 2006.
Have you seen Paprika, Colin?
that one I did see. I admittedly didn't see Tokyo Godfathers and neither Millennial Actress. And they've
No, I
always
haven't
and
seen those
actually
either.
I've actually checked out Tokyo Godfathers multiple times, but it's just one of those movies where I just happen to just never get around to.
Yeah, sure. What did you think of Paprika?
Honestly, I thought it was a great movie. I think there's something. I think there's just something about Perfect Blue where there's that visceral terror that resonates with me more.
Yeah,
Because when I think of Paprika, I think it was around the time where I think people were talking about that Christopher Nolan was deeply inspired by it,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and I think I was looking through it in that lens. And to be fair, this is when Christopher Nolan was still relatively respected, and he's still respected, but there wasn't really the memes, and it wasn't really a
Yeah.
running joke in some spots. So I think I need to revisit it and kind of like look at it removed from the Christopher Nolan aspect of it.
Do we need to bring up the Aronofsky factor here in regards to Perfect Blue?
So this is something I was talking about with someone, and actually, believe it or not, I was talking about this before you actually asked me to be on this show in particular, is that I think that with Perfect Blue, up until probably 10, 15-ish years ago, I think it was like a director's type of movie, because you get those movies out there where it seems like it doesn't land with a mainstream audience, but people who work in the industry love it. And I think that's why when Black Swan, because I think because obviously he made very serious parallels with Perfect Blue and then Jennifer Connelly scene in the bathtub and Requiem for a Dream.
Oh,
Yep.
God.
And I think that he mirrored it so much for Black Swan that I don't know if it's true that he had to buy the rights, but it was a testament
It
to
was
show
definitely
how
a
much that
rumor.
movie.
Yeah.
But the thing is that Black Swan was like this massive landmark of a film, and I feel like it's kind of soured as time's gone on because Perfect Blue is now becoming more widely circulated. So I think people kind of look at it's been like it's like a soft reevaluation of Black Swan, like, oh, it's just Perfect Blue, the remake.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that it's the type of movie that I think directors just didn't really expect would become this massive thing that would be reevaluated by the mainstream. But yeah, it's I do understand both ends, but I think ultimately I'm glad that more people recognize it outside of like the core demographic.
We've been talking for a little while. I think we could probably start wrapping stuff up. Any final thoughts from either of you about Perfect Blue?
I think, like I said earlier, it'll probably go down as one of the best debut films for any director. It'll stick with you. You will remember shots from it, just moments from it. You will remember the feeling from it. And I think Satoshi Kon should be talked about more by so many people. Like, yes, Miyazaki's still around. He's still doing stuff. He's probably going to be, at the end of the day, known as the best anime director. But if Satoshi Kon was still here today, then he would be up there with like, no, this is the best director alive at the point.
It's such a huge loss that we don't have this man with us anymore. Such a huge loss. What about you, Colin? Any final thoughts about Perfect Blue or Blue Velvet, I guess?
I mean, I guess this kind of double disc with both of them is that there's this feeling that each movie, and I know with Blue Velvet it's a little more linear, for lack of a better term, but there's some about the way what gravitates to Lynch and Satoshi Kon is that it's stuff that will always raise more questions than answers in the most rewarding way possible.
Yes.
Because there's a reason why we've had this show going on for at least an hour and a half at this point. Because there's just so much to dissect, and there's so many different viewpoints. And that's like the most rewarding part because, I mean, there's times where other lesser directors would just make it seem pretentious, but there's something that Lynch and Satoshi Kon tap into. I know with Lynch it's transcendental meditation. As for Satoshi Kon, I couldn't confirm what it was, but they have a certain understanding beyond the language of cinema, and that's something that is will resonate with me more than like any other traditional film.
Absolutely. Yeah, they've both got that X factor that just makes their films transcendent above and beyond anything else. All right, so let's start wrapping this up then. We usually finish these episodes with by putting some songs on a playlist. Vinny, have you got any songs that you want to add? You know, these could be songs that are related to either of these films, or inspired by any of these films, or just songs that you like.
Craig, you saw my Letterboxd review. What else could it be? I'm Blue, Dabba Dee Dabba Die, Eiffel 65.
I nearly said to Colin before this starts, if Vinny doesn't recommend Blue by Eiffel 65 as his song of choice, then I will delete the podcast. Anything else? Anything else you want to put on there as a, to match it up? No.
Nope. Speaks for itself.
Speaks for itself. Okay. What about you, Colin? Are you a music guy?
Yeah, no, it's I don't know, because I feel like my taste. I feel like even though I get older, I still have the taste of basically like an underclassman, like art student at college.
Hell
so
yeah.
Mine,
I can relate to that.
So mine is a song called "Blue Valentine" by Nina, and I know there's the movie Blue Valentine, but I thought with Blue being such a crossover for this was the first one to spring to mind for me.
Nice. That's awesome. I'm going to go with a similar theme. I'm going to choose Blue Monday by New Order because fuck, that song rules. And you know what? I'm going to be selfish as well because I just found out about the sample. I'm also going to put on Jesus Built My Hot Rod by Ministry. If you haven't heard this song before, you need to crank it up in your dial because it fucking rocks. All right. Cool. Colin, thank you so much for your time today and for humoring us with your observations on these two films, which are similar and completely different in a lot of ways. Where can people find you and your work on the internet?
So you can find me on Facebook and Instagram under Creamed Corn in the Universe, and then you can find me on Twitter at my handle's at You Stole the Corn, and so that's where I have all my updates. Yeah, it's that's actually a reference of something that the one-armed man yells at Leland,
That's
and the
right.
engine's revving so loud that you can barely hear it.
That's right. Yeah.
But I couldn't fit Cream Corn in the Universe in the limited characters, so I thought, oh, you stole the corn. That should be fine.
That
and of
is
course, no one
genius,
took it,
Colin.
So.
Genius.
Oh, thank you.
Nice.
But yeah, no, it's I post my weekly episode updates. I post my updates of what I'm recording or Twin Peaks thoughts as well. So yeah, you're always welcome to follow me on either of those on social media, and then also I'm on Apple Podcasts, I'm on Spotify, the Podbean app, Google Podcasts, pretty much most of the mainstays. But
Sure.
yeah, so yeah, it's those are my plugs, and yeah,
Awesome.
I think that's it on my end.
Nice. I meant to do this earlier, but I completely forgot. Vinny, we talked about Blue Velvet, the song, earlier, because Dorothy Valens covers Blue Velvet in the film, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that a cover of Blue Velvet would sound better coming out of James Marshall or Eddie Vedder?
Eddie Vedder, because fuck James Marshall. God.
All right.
Oh, that's
Okay.
harsh.
Okay.
Oh, that's so harsh.
All right. I'm going to count down from 3, and we're both going to do Eddie Vedder sings Blue Velvet.
Oh no.
Feel free to chime in if you want, Colin. It's optional. It's extracurricular. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Blue Velvet.
This is a pillow bed concrete.
Yeah.
All right, I'm ending the episode there.
So hopefully that wasn't too uncanny for copyright or anything. So I think we're good.
I think we're good.